Welcome to Creating a Buyer Transaction. Today we're going to walk through the key forms used in typical buyer transactions and how to properly complete them in web forms. The goal isn't just to fill in the blanks, it's to understand why each section exists, how to explain it to your clients, and how to avoid common compliance issues. Now, you'll see on my screen here, I've started by creating a transaction and I've named it 123 Main Street John Doe. Obviously, use the street address you're writing your offer on and put your client's name. Then you're going to select the template. You should already have these made from a previous video that we've done. Residential sale template will be when you're working with a buyer. Then I'm going to import data. I'm going to scroll down here to Windsor, Essex, Sarnia, Chatham. I'm going to go to the MLS number of the listing that I'm writing an offer on. And I'm going to paste that MLS number in there. Then I'm going to add myself in as a cooperating salesperson. I always uncheck the wizard. I don't find it useful, but feel free to do however you please. Then click Create. You'll see it's automatically pulling the information from the listing already. So the first thing we're going to do is go to the right-hand side and we're going to click Contacts. Next, we're going to add in our buyer. Now, I always recommend putting in an email address at this point. This will save you time down the road when you are sending things for signatures. Add to your address book. Keep this checked off. I'm just going to uncheck it because I don't need to have a ton of John Does in my contacts. Hit Save, and you'll see John has now showed up here. If John also has a wife that's writing an offer with him, then click Add in Jane Doe and her information. Next, we're going to go to Forms. And you'll see all of the information, all the forms that we've included in that template should already be showing up here. And anything that we've done in the template will also translate here as well. So you'll see once we get into the buyer rep and the agreement of purchase sale, some of that auto-populated information will show up there. So first thing we're going to do is the RECO information guide. This is step one when working with a client, no matter if it's a seller or a buyer. So click RECO information guide. Now it's a 12-page document. You just need to make sure that the client or the person that you're sending this to understands the representation and what kind of services are being provided. You're going to scroll down to page 13 where there's an acknowledgement here. Your name should auto-populate, and you're going to sign and date this when you are sending it for signatures. You're going to put your client's name in here, so when you send it for signatures, you'll know where they'll be signing. Next, I'm going to go on to the buyer designated rep agreement. Now you'll see I click transaction forms up here. This should automatically save what you've already worked on when you switch between forms. If you're not comfortable with that, hit the save and exit button. It'll take you back to your list of forms and it will save. I do it this way every time and I've never had any issues with it not saving. Now, this is the contract between you and the buyer. It authorizes you to represent the buyer and outlines the services that you're going to provide, how you'll get paid, and what obligations both parties have. So first step, make sure the buyer brokerage buyer brokerage, I guess, in this situation, is listed above. Your buyer's name, their address you put in here, and then you're going to put your name as the designated representative. If you have a team or you and someone else are teaming up together to work with this buyer, you can also add them in there, whoever that other agent is. Then you're going to have your buyer rep time frame. Now, any offers you write with this client have to fall in this time frame window. So if you're planning on working with this client for a while, make sure you allot for that amount of time, because then you'll have to do amendments to extend the buyer rep, which can be annoying. So there's no time limit. You can have it as short or as long as you'd like. Just make sure that you specify. So in this case, if I'm writing this up today, I'm going to date it for today. And it's going to commence at 3 p.m. And then I'm going to put the date that it'll end. So I'm going to just do like end of September. That should be lots of time. Now, property type. This is what the type of property is that your buyer's looking for. Are they looking for a residential? Are they looking for a commercial property? Are they looking for land? Like, specify that in your property use. Some people are looking for multiple things. You can list all of them here, okay? If it's just single family residential, that works. Then you have your geographic location. Now, I usually do Windsor or Essex County. You can go beyond this and do all of Ontario, or you can go more minimal and specify a specific neighborhood like South Windsor. Or if your buyer's feeling really uncomfortable about being in a contract, you can specify for whatever address you're writing the offer on. Just know that the buyer rep is only good for that one specific property. So to save yourself some time, keep your geographic location more broad. Okay. You're going to see here Schedule A. They're listing that because there's automatically a Schedule A listed in the buyer rep. There's a spot here where you can add in more schedules if you need to. There's some agents who have more terms and conditions, more lists of services that they provide, and all of that. They would add that in as an additional schedule. Otherwise, just leave it blank. Down here, you're on your commission. Now, you're going to put in a commission that you would like to receive. If for whatever reason the buyer's writing an offer on a property where the seller is not providing commission, it now falls on them. So for instance, they're writing an offer on a for sale by owner property. And before you even show the property, you're going to contact the seller and you're going to discuss with them whether they're going to be providing the commission or not if you bring them an offer. Okay. If they're okay with it, just make sure you decide the amounts, obviously, when you're writing your offer, and we'll get a little bit more into how to deal with that scenario later on. But if it falls on your buyer, the amount that you put in here is what you will charge the buyer. Okay, so let's just say you put 2.5% in here. Okay, or you can put a dollar amount, that's fine. And then if for whatever reason they go from buying to leasing a property, you can put, half month's rent in here or something along those lines, so you're covered in case, the scenario changes. Just make sure that before you show that for sale by owner property to your buyer, you make sure they understand that this is the scenario where I'm showing you this property, but I've already confirmed with the seller they're not paying commission, so it will now fall on you. So you need to take that into consideration when you're writing up your offer. So some buyers will reduce the amount that they're offering by whatever their commission is because that's what they can afford. Okay, they have to take those things into account. There's a bubble here. This is newer. The buyer needs to initial confirming that they know that the commission is plus tax. Okay. Then we have a holdover period. Generally, most people do 90 days. This is completely up to you. You can do as little or as many days that you'd like this to extend. This basically just covers you. For instance, you showed a property while you were under contract and they liked the house, but they weren't 100% sure on it, or there was negotiations happening and the seller wasn't coming to an agreement with them. And then later down the road, they reapproach the seller directly or the listing agent directly and write an offer. Even though you're not under that contractual period, if you introduce the property to the buyer during that time, you're still entitled to commission and the buyer may need to pay that. That's where this amount up here comes into play again. Okay. Now, if I scroll down, this is obviously the signing page. You're going to sign to bind the brokerage. Okay. Pay close attention to what's listed underneath a signature spot. When it says authorized to bind a brokerage, that's you. You're signing that. If you see something, signature of, manager or broker of record, you'll need to send that in the office to get myself, Jen, or Kelly to sign. Buyer will sign and date. I always recommend putting your client's phone number in here. No one will be contacting them without your permission. The reason that it's good to have it there is if, you're providing contact information to their lawyer, they've called to ask for contact information, or God forbid something happens to you and we need to get in contact with them to, either they want to find another agent to work with or we cancel the agreement. Okay. Declaration of insurance. This is what you're going to sign, declaring that you have insurance through WECO. And then they're going to sign to acknowledge they've received a copy. And then you have your Schedule A. If you used your template, this clause should already be in there because we added in when we were creating the clause. This just lists services that you'll provide to the buyer. You can be more detailed about this, or you can make it more minimal. Just as long as this area isn't left blank, we're happy. Okay. Now, next, we're going to go to the agreement of purchase and sale. Again, some of the information is connecting to MLS, so you'll see some of the data has imported. Not all of it, just some of it. Okay, so it's your job to fill it in. So whatever date you're writing the offer is the date at the top. Buyer's name, seller's name, just make sure everything's correct. The address of the property fronting on this is clearly left blank. We're going to go back to the listing and we're going to see it's fronting on the east side of Queen Street. Now, it's always a good habit to verify the information. You should be able to figure out how to determine if it actually is on the east side of Queen Street. So you can verify that. You can also go to GeoWarehouse and confirm information on there. I'm going to put City of Windsor. Having a frontage of, so Shane has 39 feet. I'm going to go to GeoWarehouse. You see I've already pulled up the property report for Queen Street, and I'm just going to scroll down here, and you'll see 39 feet for frontage. So I'm going to write that in there. Now, sometimes you'll see some agents will short form the legal description. There's really nothing wrong with that. I just prefer to copy exactly what's on GeoWarehouse just to make sure that, easement codes or anything like that aren't missing. So I'm going to delete this out and I'm going to go to GeoWarehouse. I'm going to scroll up here and you'll see legal description is listed right under the owner's name. If you hit this little button here, it'll copy it and then you can paste it right in there. Okay. Purchase price. You determine with your buyer what they're willing to pay. You provide them with comparables and, a range of where you think the house will sell for, what it's worth, and let your buyer decide on a price. You don't want to be saying, I would write an offer for $300,000 for this house, because if it sells for $301 or $305, now it's your fault and it's on you. So it's always good to give a range, but leave it up to the buyer to make the final decision on the number. Okay. So in this case, it's listed at $259,900, has an offer presentation of June 26th. Probably at this price point, there may be some multiple offers. A lot of agents will wait until it's closer to the offer presentation to decide on an actual price, because if they're competing, they may want to get a little bit more aggressive with their price. They may not want to include conditions in their offer. It is more common right now to include conditions in your offer, so it's a little bit safer, but always verify. And always contact the listing agent and just see if they're willing to consider preemptive offers if it's not already written in their remarks. As you can see, the seller will consider a preemptive offer. So in the best interest of my buyer, I'm going to try and get this offer in sooner so we're not competing with other offers. Okay, so I'm going to go back up here, put in my offer price, whatever that may be. You'll see when you type it in here, it's going to automatically write out the written form. Then you have your deposit. Buyer submits. Most circumstances we use upon acceptance, but there's other options. Herewith is if you're providing an actual check or funds with your offer. So for instance, you're sending over an offer and the deposit at the same time. Most people don't do this until they know their offer is getting accepted. And then as otherwise described in this agreement. So sometimes what happens is, depending on the scenario, maybe you have that, they're going to provide a $1,000 deposit right away, and then, an additional $4,000 after the conditions have been fulfilled, for a total of $5,000. This is just so you don't have so much money tied up before the deal goes firm. But rarely do we see that as well. Usually upon acceptance is a good option. And then just put whatever your deposit amount is. And obviously this deposit amount would become higher if the price of the house is higher. If you're doing a deposit, if you're putting a deposit on $1 million property, obviously you probably want to get more aggressive with that deposit amount. Here is where you're going to put the listing brokerage who's holding the deposit. Very rarely is it someone other than the listing brokerage, but it does happen. Sometimes there's mere postings on MLS where the listing brokerage doesn't want to have anything to do with the contract. They just strictly charge the seller a dollar figure to put it up on MLS, and they're not dealing with anything else. We don't do that here at Deerbrook, just because you're signing a contract with this client. If something goes south and you haven't reviewed or had anything to do with that contract, your license is still at stake. Okay. So for instance, something's written in the offer incorrectly, it's still on you and you had nothing to do with it. So this is why we don't do mere postings at Deerbrook, but you will see them occasionally from those little one-off brokerages here and there. Okay. Then you have your Schedule A is listed because it's required. And then you can add in additional schedules if need be. If I go back to this listing and come up here, if there's like a little stack of paper icon here, there's attachments. They may include a Schedule B if their brokerage has an interest-bearing trust account. You'll need to include that Schedule B in your agreement. Maybe they have additional terms or contracts for rental equipment, or surveys of the property or anything like that. Include them in your offer if you find it necessary, and they will be additional schedules. Irrevocability, irrevocable by the buyer. This is how much time you're giving the seller to respond. So in this case, let's do 8 p.m. on Saturday, okay? Take into consideration your own time, okay? A lot of agents will put 11:59 p.m. for condition due dates to give them the most time in that day. But when you're sending over an offer and you're giving until 11:59 p.m., technically that seller has until that time to respond. Are you going to be awake at 11:30 to deal with getting a counteroffer signed or anything along those lines? Make sure you're setting yourself up for success, okay? Doesn't mean you have to do 8 p.m. You can do whatever time you think is acceptable for you and your buyer for responding. And hopefully someone doesn't do this to you and they actually give you enough time to respond. But I have seen it happen, so try to prevent those issues from happening by picking a reasonable time. Now, completion date. You can close fairly quickly. I always recommend at least 3 weeks closing if you're doing immediate possession, unless you verify with the buyer's lawyer. The buyer's lawyer needs to have the time to search the title and get everything in order for that closing. If they're a really busy lawyer and they don't have the time to do it, they're going to tell your client, I'm sorry, you're going to have to find another lawyer to close. I can't do it that quickly. And then you're in that situation where you're scrambling to find a lawyer. Less busy lawyers may not always be the best lawyers. So call them ahead of time. Make sure they can do it before you write your offer. Okay? I've seen things close within 5 days. I've seen things close, a week. Just make sure you're verifying that information ahead of time. Okay? And it very well can happen. Now, in this notices section, you'll see Shane is representing the seller. I'm representing the buyer. This is completely acceptable. I can acknowledge notices on behalf of my client because there is not multiple rep. It's both the same brokerage, but 2 different designated reps. Chattels included. This will automatically populate whatever's included. You can add in more things if you'd like to, okay? Maybe you want to include the shed in the backyard. I don't even know if this property has one, but I'm just going to do it for, example. Maybe there's a gazebo in the backyard and we're not sure if it's considered a fixture or not. Some gazebos are not fixtures because they're not bolted down, but some that are bolted down aren't bolted down could still be considered a fixture if there was an intentional foundation poured for it. Same thing for a shed. So when in doubt, list things, okay? Garage door remotes, include those. Maybe the ceiling fan in the master bedroom has a remote. Include that in there too. These are all things that you want to make sure everybody's on the same page that it will be left behind. Fixtures excluded. Check the listings. See if there's anything excluded. It would be under where this inclusions area is. Maybe they have a built-in or sorry, not a built-in, but maybe they've got like a cabinet that they have bolted to the wall. Technically that's a fixture, but they want to take it with them. They need to include that in their fixtures excluded. Rental items. Are there rental items? Check the listing. Rental item equipment, none. So put none or NA. I don't necessarily think that leaving this blank is a good idea, but just specify so everybody's on the same page. When the seller's reviewing the offer and they see that you wrote none, and then they realized, oh, the hot water tank is rented. Now you can make sure that information is correct before you accept the offer. HST. Usually a single family residential property. Resale properties are included in. Okay, there are other situations like vacant land that may be in addition to. Just verify that information before you write your offer. Title search. I usually do 10 business days before closing. It gives the lawyer enough time to do their searches. I've seen some agents do less time than that. Some of them do more. It's really up to you, but I find that 10 business days is a good sweet spot. Okay. Present use. Actually, here, let's do that 10 business days. I think we had a closing date. I don't know if I put the closing date in here, but they were requesting July 31st as the possession date here. Also be careful with Friday closings. And this is the end of the month too. The reason being is if for whatever reason there's a delay in closing and they can't close on Friday, guess what? Your buyer's not getting it until Monday. What are they going to do on the weekend? So if you can avoid a Friday, do Monday through Thursday. It's just a safer bet. In this case, this is what they're requesting. Chances are they've already purchased a property and that's their closing date and they're trying to make it all match up. Just have a conversation with the listing agent. There's no problem discussing things ahead of time with the listing agent to make sure that the information you're including in your offer is correct. Okay. And something that, the seller will even consider. Maybe your client needs a week before that. Are they okay with that? Can they get bridge financing? Okay. Present use. Single family residential. Okay. I always recommend putting whatever the present use is of the property. Okay. Scroll down. You'll see your signing page. The names have been pre-filled here. Now, Shane and I are both working out of the same brokerage. So technically, there's no cooperating brokerage. So I'm going to delete out my information. You may get a little bit of pushback from some agents who've been in the business a while, just because with the change with Tressa, it's also made changes with how you display cooperating brokerage. Okay, multiple rep has been changed, and there's a little bit of confusion on how to fill out these forms, but this is technically the correct way of doing it. And if you want to write your name in here, you could do something like that if you feel more comfortable, because technically Deerbrook is on the listing side only. Okay. Commission trust, leave it blank. There's no need to sign a commission trust agreement because there's no cooperating brokerage. Okay. Schedule A. Here are the pre-written clauses that I've included in my template. You'll see the balance price is here, like we had discussed earlier. Financing clause, home inspection, and a walkthrough clause. You can add in more clauses. Maybe this property has something specific that you need to have in there. Maybe you want to put the broom swept condition, or maybe you want to verify that there's vacant possession because there's currently a tenant living in the house. Like, there's all these things to consider. Is there a swimming pool? Has it been opened? Does it need to be closed? How close to closing season is it? All of these things you want to make sure that you're verifying, okay? Maybe my buyer doesn't need financing. Take the clause right out of there, okay? Maybe instead of one walkthrough clause, they'd like two. Oh, if I can spell. You can change anything in the wording as well, okay? Now, I'm going to switch over to my confirmation of cooperation. Again, in this scenario, a lot of people get confused on how to fill this out. The listing brokerage is representing the seller. And then you'll see here the seller client and buyer client are each separately represented by different designated representatives of the same brokerage, and there is no multiple rep. Okay. this is a good spot to write in what the commission is going to the buyer representative. Okay, so seller designated rep agrees to pay buyer 2% commission. Okay, we're stating exactly what's on MLS. We just kind of had to tweak where we write it. When we're writing an offer on another brokerage listing, you would put your commission in here. So in this case, Deerbrook's on both sides, so we're going to write it here. Seller brokerage is multiple rep. So if you're on both sides of the agreement, you're going to check that off. Okay, and we do everything at Deerbrook as designated reps. We don't have brokerage representation. So any options that say brokerage has entered, you're not going to do. You're going to do designated rep. Okay, and in here you can specify any additional disclosures as well. Okay, for instance, maybe the seller brokerage is representing more than one buyer on the property. Okay, you need to disclose that. Also, if the buying agent has another agent in their office and they're both brokerage representation, they need to be notified to let the seller and both buyers know that they're a multiple rep. Okay, so you would disclose that as well. You won't have that scenario here at Deerbrook because, like I said, we do everything designated rep. But if you're on the listing side and you see, let's just say 2 people from Royal LePage have submitted offers, you need to let them know they may potentially be in a multiple rep situation between another buyer. Okay, if that person that you're speaking with knows they've signed a designated rep, then there's no problem. Okay, we don't need to let the other person know. Okay, I'm going to scroll down here and you'll see only a seller brokerage. So if you want to also write your name in here and both of you sign, that's fine. It feels strange not having you sign when you're representing the buyer under cooperating brokerage, but technically there's no buying or cooperating brokerage. Okay, so it's sufficient enough just to have Shane on signing on behalf of Deerbrook in this scenario. Okay, if it's multiple rep, the seller and the buyer will both initial here as well, along with completing a multiple rep disclosure form as well, and you'll find those in web forms too. Buyer and seller will both sign this form as well. Individual ID. We briefly went over this when listing a property. Make sure when you're writing an offer, you also ID the person at that time in person. Okay? Get their driver's license information, take a picture of it, fill out your FINTRAC form after the fact. It's a lot harder to get ID after the fact, and technically you're supposed to do it when you're getting the offer signed at the very latest. Okay, so if you're doing a buyer rep ahead of time and you haven't written an offer on a property yet, do your FINTRAC at that time too. Okay, you're going to fill out all the details. You're going to verify if there's a third party involved. If there is, you're going to identify them. You're going to fill out the client risk check boxes and determine the number total. And then just put your purpose and intended nature of the business relationship. There's an optional, sorry, I can't talk today. An optional section here where you can write, your business dealings. Let's just say you're helping your best friend purchase a property. Have known this person for 20 years, helping them buy a property. Whatever the case, do a description in there, even though it says optional. It just keeps FINTRAC off our back. Next, we're going to go to receipt of funds. This form does not need to be filled out until after the offer is accepted and the deposit has been submitted. You should get a copy of the deposit either from your client before they submit or from the listing brokerage. Okay, listing agents do not need to fill out a receipt of funds, just buying agents. If the deposit is going to a builder or a lawyer, there's no need for a receipt of funds, but if it's going to a brokerage, you will need to fill it out. You'll find a lot of the time deposits are being sent by e-transfer, and usually there's a daily limit on the amount you can send. So if your deposit is over $5,000, chances are you're going to see multiple deposits for one property. So that's why you'll see there's multiple boxes here that you fill out. Maybe, 2,000 was sent today, 2,000 was sent tomorrow, and then the remaining 1,000 was sent the next day after that. As long as the funds are starting to come in, RICO and FINTRAC have no issue as long as it's being documented. Now, technically, you also need to identify where the funds are coming from. So if your buyer has submitted a personal check, it should have the account holder name and the number on it, and whether it's checking or savings, you can verify. If they sent by e-transfer or other means, you'll need to ask your client for their account information. If your client doesn't feel comfortable providing this, just state here, client did not feel comfortable providing this information, and leave it at that. You've attempted it. They didn't feel right providing. Then you're going to also identify the person submitting the funds. If you've already ID'd the person by filling out an individual ID form, then just put C individual identification form for this information. Okay, then you don't have to fill it out twice. Okay. Lastly, you have an accepted offer. You're going to send in all your paperwork to the office. Okay, so once everything's signed and you have signed completed copies, you're going to fill out an offer info sheet. Very simple. You're going to put in sale price. This may be different if there was some countering back and forth. Deposit amount, who's holding it, closing date, is it conditional or firm? Check off which one. Financing, put the due dates. Not financing, sorry, conditions, put the due dates. Financing, house to sell, home inspection, insurance, if there's any other clauses or conditions, I should say, like a septic inspection, wet inspection, lawyer review, anything along those lines. You're going to put selling firm is also Deerbrook. Representation is my name, Laura Urich. Total commission, leave blank. You don't know what that is. I only know what the selling portion is. That's 2% commission. Okay, you don't need to put percent because it's right here. If there's any adjustments, maybe you're reducing your commission and you've discussed this before the offer had been submitted. And there's been, like for our office, we require a commission adjustment agreement to be filled out. This makes sure that all parties are involved and understand that there is a reduction in the price, or the commission, I should say. Only fill out the information you know. Do you know the purchaser's lawyer? Maybe you don't know yet. To be determined. Now we know we can follow up with you to find out who the client's lawyer is using. We technically don't need the lawyer information until the property is firm. How is your client obtained? Just write in there, family friend or referral from a friend or, internet lead or whatever it is. Then you're going to put your client's name. If you have two clients and then two different contact numbers, just check off that they're both buyers and put both their numbers. Sometimes the lawyers will call us to verify contact information. Maybe they wrote something down wrong or whatever. We can verify that with them. Is the sale a result of a relocation? Are they coming from another area? Are they moving out of our area? Yes or no? And then forms attached. These are all the things that you're including. Now, if you're only on the selling side, you're only going to be completing the top 3. If you're on the buying side, you're going to do all 6. Okay? Now, once your property goes firm and your paperwork's been submitted to the office, the girls will enter it into the system. They'll verify your commission. They'll put that in, and then they're going to send you a trade record sheet. You're going to review the trade record sheet, make sure everything on there is correct, lawyer information, deposit amounts, commissions, all of that. Once you verified that everything's right, you're going to sign off on it. You'll also notice on that form, there's a spot in the bottom left corner that will say file requirements if anything's missing from the file. Make sure you review that, and if you have any questions about what's listed, feel free to contact the office and we can verify what it is that you're missing. Sometimes we have an offer that is missing an initial on the 4th page. Like it could be as simple as that. We're just trying to make sure that we're tightening up your contract and everything's done completely so there's no issues down the road. Okay, so make sure you get those things completed and submitted to the office. If the property closes and we're missing information, we're going to require that before you get paid just to protect you and the brokerage. Okay. Now, when you're done, you're going to hit this save and exit button. And here's all your completed forms. Okay. Now, if you want to print them out and get them signed in person, just hit the select all button. Technically, you don't need your FinTrack signed. You don't need your receipt of funds or your offer info sheet. So you can select the circles that you want to. Hit the little basket and you have an option to send to Authentisign for signatures. You can download it as a zip file, so it's easy to email over wherever it's going. If they're large files, you can print, save it as a PDF. You can email it directly. This is a good option if you'd like the advice email to review your documents before you send them for signatures. Just click this view email or send email button, put the recipient name and the advice email in here. And then just put a little note, hey, I completed these forms. Can you just make sure I'm not missing anything before I send for signatures? Hit send, and one of us on the management team will review and give you any tips and advice that you can add or remove from your paperwork. Okay. And if you want to delete forms, you can hit this delete forms button, but I wouldn't recommend doing it this way. You can also hit these three little lines here. You can download what you've already saved, print, or delete if you accidentally uploaded a form you don't need. Okay, so next I'm going to show you how to send it to Authentisign.